Okay, so are you thinking about reselling? And, if those Amazon return pallets are really worth it, especially for electronics.
Yeah.
Let's see what we can find out. We've got some research here on the electronics resale market. And you know how to potentially make some money from Amazon returns. You're going to be really surprised by just how many returns Amazon deals with. I mean, the numbers are crazy. And then on top of that, we'll look at some ways to get those pallets without spending a fortune.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing, just to see how much the consumer electronics market has grown. It's massive, projected to hit almost $400 billion this year in the US alone. But that also means there's a ton of competition out there.
That's a good point. So if you're going to succeed in this market,
Mhm.
you really have to figure out a way to set yourself apart.
Exactly. And one way to do that is by cutting down your sourcing costs. That's where those Amazon return pallets can really help.
Okay, let's talk about the details. Amazon sells a ridiculous amount of stuff.
Right.
I think I read somewhere it's like over 4,000 items every minute in the US.
That's right. And on top of that, about 30% of all online purchases end up being returned.
Wow, 30%. So we're talking about like mountains of return.
You got it. Everything from faulty items to just plain buyer's remorse. And then you factor in Amazon's generous return policies. It all adds up to a major logistical headache for them. It costs them time, money, and a lot of storage space to deal with all those returns.
So it sounds like Amazon's pretty motivated to get rid of these returns and to do it quickly and cheaply.
Right. That's where liquidators come in. Companies like the bin store liquidation, pallets and truckloads. They buy up those returns in bulk and then resell them at a discount.
So is that how we as resellers can get in on this?
Exactly. You get access to the same products that are being sold on Amazon, but at a much lower price.
Sounds almost too good to be true. What's the catch?
Well, there are some risks you have to be aware of. When you buy untested customer returns, you're buying pallets as is, meaning there's no guarantee what condition the items will be in.
So it's a little bit of a gamble.
It is. But it can be a very profitable one. It's estimated that something like 75% of return electronics are actually functional.
That's pretty encouraging, but I guess that means 25% are not. So then what's?
Well, that's where your technical skills come in. If you're comfortable with electronics repair, you can often fix these items yourself. And even if you're not a tech whiz, there are lots of resources online that can help you learn.
So knowing how to do some basic repairs could really help you boost your profits.
Absolutely. It can turn a pallet of so-called untested returns into a real gold mine.
Okay, so let's say you've got a pallet of returns. You've checked everything out and made any repairs that were needed. What's the next step? How do you actually turn these returns into cash?
Well, first you have to figure out what kind of reseller you want to be. Do you want to specialize in a certain niche, like gaming consoles or smart home devices? Or do you want to offer a wider variety of products? This decision is going to guide your sourcing and marketing efforts.
Makes sense. I guess choosing a niche would help you target your audience more effectively. But it also kind of limits your options, right?
Yeah, there's definitely a trade-off there. Focusing on a niche allows you to build expertise and potentially charge higher prices, but a broader approach gives you more flexibility and you could end up with a larger customer base.
So is there a right answer?
Not really. It depends on your skills, your resources, and your goals.
Okay, so let's say you've chosen your niche, or maybe you've decided to go with a broader approach. What are some of the key strategies for making money from these returns?
Well, one thing you need to do is get good at inspecting and sorting. You want to be able to assess the condition of each item quickly and accurately, so you can price it right.
So basically, you're separating the good stuff from the junk.
Exactly. Anything that's in perfect condition, maybe just an open box return, you can resell as new. But items that have been used a bit or have some cosmetic damage will need to be listed as used or refurbished.
I can imagine that could get a little tricky sometimes. How do you decide what the right price is for a used or refurbished item?
There are a few things to consider. The original retail price, the condition of the item, and the current market demand. You can use online tools and resources to research comparable items and get a sense of what the fair market value is.
So it takes a bit of research and you have to know what's going on in the market.
Definitely. But once you get the hang of it, it becomes second nature.
Okay, so we've got our items sorted and priced. What's next?
Now you need to think about where you're going to sell these things. Are you going to focus on online marketplaces like eBay or Amazon? Or will you try selling locally through platforms like Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist?
I guess each platform has its pluses and minuses.
For sure. Online marketplaces give you a much wider reach, but they also come with fees and a lot of competition. Local platforms can be more cost-effective, but you're limited to a smaller area.
It sounds like there are a lot of things to think about when you're choosing your sales channels.
There are. Your choice will depend on your preferences, the types of products you're selling, and who you're trying to reach.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive. We talked about the scale of Amazon returns, the potential profits, the risks involved, and some of the first steps for sourcing, inspecting, and pricing these returns.
That's right. And in the next part, we're going to take a closer look at specific techniques for repairing and refurbishing electronics, as well as some more advanced strategies for maximizing your profits and building a successful reselling business.
So welcome back. Last time we were talking about the possible profits and the challenges of reselling Amazon returns,
Yeah.
especially electronics. So this time, let's get into the nitty-gritty, how to inspect, repair, and actually get these things listed for sale.
Sounds good. Let's start with inspecting those pallets. Remember, when you buy returns, you're often buying blind. You really need to develop a system for assessing what you've got, and you got to be able to do it quickly and accurately.
Okay, so say the pallet arrives. What's the first thing you do?
First, you want to make sure you have a dedicated workspace for this. Good lighting is really important. Then you want to carefully unpack everything. And I mean everything. You just never know what might be hiding under a pile of bubble wrap.
Got it. And then it's time to start sorting.
Right. Start categorizing the items based on their condition. Are they brand new in the box, open box but look like they haven't been used? Are there signs of wear? Or are they obviously damaged? This step is super important. It'll make pricing and listing much easier later on.
Okay, makes sense. What about testing, especially with electronics? How do you actually know what works and what doesn't?
Testing is absolutely crucial. Make sure you have a power strip handy. For simple things like headphones or Bluetooth speakers, testing is pretty easy. But for more complex stuff like laptops or gaming consoles, you're going to need some basic diagnostic tools.
What kind of tools are we talking about?
Things like a multimeter to check the voltage, or a set of small screwdrivers to open up devices and look at the components inside. Don't worry, you don't need to be an electronics engineer or anything. But having some basic tools and knowing how to troubleshoot problems can be really helpful.
Okay, so what happens when you find something that doesn't work? Is it an automatic loss?
Not always. This is where those repair skills we mentioned earlier come in. Sometimes it's a really easy fix, like a loose connection or a missing button. Other times it might mean replacing a part or two.
Right. You mentioned there were online resources for learning those repair skills. Any recommendations?
Yeah, absolutely. Websites like iFixit, they have these super detailed repair guides for all kinds of devices. And there are YouTube channels that are dedicated to electronics repair. You'd be surprised how much you can learn from just watching someone else fix a problem.
So even if you don't know much about electronics, you can definitely learn how to do basic repairs if you have the right resources.
Exactly. And the more you learn, the more of those untested returns you can turn into profit.
Okay, that makes sense. Now let's switch gears a little bit and talk about listing these items for sale. Where do you even start?
Well, the first thing is deciding which platform you're going to use. Are you going to go with one of the big marketplaces like eBay or Amazon, or maybe something a bit more niche that focuses on specific types of electronics?
The bigger platforms have a huge audience, but I bet there's also tons of competition.
That's true. The bigger the platform, the more important it is to have really good listings that stand out from the crowd. You need to have clear, well-lit photos, detailed and accurate descriptions, and your prices have to be competitive.
So quality over quantity when it comes to listings.
Yeah, you could say that, especially when you're first starting out. It's better to have a few really great listings than a bunch of so-so ones.
Okay, so what are some tips for creating those standout listings?
Well, photography is huge. Don't just use your phone's camera in bad lighting. Invest in a light box. Or even just use some white poster board to make a clean background. And make sure you take pictures from multiple angles. Show the item from all sides. Any ports or buttons. Close-ups of any details or branding.
Got it. So presentation is really key. What about the written description?
Be as detailed as possible. List out all the features, any accessories that are included, and be completely upfront about the condition. If it's a used item, describe any wear and tear honestly. Don't try to hide any flaws. It'll just lead to returns and bad reviews later on.
Transparency is super important. What about pricing? How do you find that balance between being competitive and making sure you're still making a profit?
Research is going to be your best friend here. Look at sold listings on eBay or Amazon for similar items in similar conditions. See what other sellers are charging. And make sure to factor in your costs, too. The price you paid for the pallet, any money you spent on repairs, the time you've put in, platform fees, and shipping costs.
So it's not just about like marking up the price by a certain percentage. You have to understand the market and your own expenses.
Right. Pricing is a bit of a balancing act. It might take some trial and error to figure out what works best for you and your niche.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's talk a little bit about those niche markets, within electronics. What are some examples of things resellers could specialize in?
Oh, there are so many options. Vintage gaming consoles are always popular. Retro handhelds, too. You could focus on high-end headphones or audio equipment. Or you could get into the smart home trend, things like smart speakers, security cameras, thermostats.
It's interesting because each of those niches attracts a different type of buyer. So I guess your marketing would have to be tailored to them.
Absolutely. If you're selling vintage games, you might want to be active in online forums or social media groups
Hmm.
that are dedicated to retro gaming. If you're selling smart home tech,
Hmm.
maybe you could partner with local electricians or home automation installers.
So finding your niche is just the first step. Now you really need to understand who those buyers are and how to reach them.
Right. And the more you specialize, the more you become known as the go-to person for those products.
This is pretty cool. I'm starting to see how reselling can be really interesting. It's more than just buying low and selling high. There's real strategy to it.
It is strategic, and it's creative too. You're always problem solving, figuring out how to source the best items, how to repair them, how to present them in a way that makes people want to buy them.
It sounds like it takes a certain kind of person to be successful at this.
It does. You need to be resourceful, detail-oriented,
Hmm.
and comfortable with taking some risks. But if you have the right attitude and you're willing to learn, it can be super rewarding, both financially and personally.
Okay, so we've talked about inspection, repair, listing,
Mhm.
even niching down. What else should people think about when they're building a reselling business, based on these Amazon returns?
Well, one thing we haven't touched on yet is scaling up your operation. As your business grows, you might need to start thinking about storage space, maybe hiring some help, possibly even investing in software to manage your inventory and sales.
That sounds like a whole other level.
It is. But we'll save those details for next time. We'll talk about strategies for taking your reselling business to the next level and making it something that's really sustainable.
All right, so welcome back to our deep dive into reselling Amazon returns. We've gone through the basics of sourcing, inspecting, repairing, and listing those items. So now let's talk about how to, level up your reselling game.
Yeah, today we'll get into some more advanced strategies for maximizing those profits and really building a business that goes beyond just doing quick flips.
Okay, I'm ready. What are these advanced tactics?
Well, one area a lot of resellers don't pay enough attention to is branding. Think about it. Why should somebody buy from you instead of all the other sellers out there?
Yeah, good question. I guess it's not just about having the lowest price.
Right. You need to give people a reason to choose you, to trust you. That's where branding comes in.
So how do you build a brand as a reseller, especially when you're selling, return stuff from all different companies?
It's about creating a consistent experience for your customers. This could be anything from how you photograph your items, to the packaging you use, to how you talk to them when they contact customer service.
So it's about creating like a feeling or an image
Yeah,
that people connect with your business.
exactly. Think about some of the big brands out there. They're not just selling products, they're selling a lifestyle, an emotion. You can do the same thing on a smaller scale with your reselling business.
I see what you mean. So it's about finding ways to make yourself stand out. But how do you actually make more money?
One way is by adding value to the stuff you sell. Don't just resell things in the same condition you got them in.
Yeah.
Think about how you can make them more attractive to buyers.
Okay, like what?
Well, let's say you're reselling gaming consoles. You could bundle them with extra controllers or popular games, or maybe even a subscription to an online gaming service. Or if you're selling smartphones, you could throw in a screen protector and a case.
So you're basically giving them a more complete package.
Right. And that gives you the opportunity to charge a higher price.
Okay, that makes sense. What are some other things you can do to increase profits?
Well, you could try exploring different sales channels. Most resellers start with online marketplaces like eBay or Amazon. But there are other options.
Like what?
You could try selling through social media, like Facebook Marketplace or Instagram. Or you could create your own website and set up an e-commerce store.
So it's about reaching more people
Hmm.
and finding new ways to connect with potential buyers.
Yeah. And each sales channel has its own advantages and disadvantages. So it's important to do some research and see which ones work best for your business.
Okay. So we've talked about branding, adding value, and trying out different sales channels. What else is there?
Well, as you start to grow your business, you really need to start thinking about putting systems and processes in place. This is especially important if you want to scale up your operation
Hmm.
and maybe even hire some employees down the line.
So what kind of systems are we talking about?
Everything from managing your inventory to fulfilling orders to handling customer service.
Hmm.
You need to have clear procedures for every part of your business so that everything runs smoothly, even when you're not directly involved.
That sounds kind of overwhelming. Any advice on how to start doing that?
Well, start by writing down everything you're already doing. Document every step involved in your business, from buying a pallet of returns to shipping out an order.
Okay. And then what?
Then look at those steps and see if there are ways to streamline them. Are there any parts you could automate? Are there any tasks you could delegate to someone else?
Right. So it's about working smarter, not harder.
Exactly. The more you can systematize things, the easier it's going to be to grow your business.
Well, we've covered a lot in this three-part deep dive. We started with the basics of reselling Amazon returns, and we worked our way up to some pretty advanced stuff for building a business that's sustainable and profitable.
And we've really just scratched the surface. There's so much more to learn about this.
Where can our listeners go if they want to keep learning?
There are tons of great resources out there. Online forums, social media groups, blogs, podcasts, you name it. Just do a quick search for reselling Amazon returns, and you'll find a ton of information.
And don't forget about good old-fashioned experience. Sometimes the best way to learn is just by doing.
Absolutely. Start small, experiment, try different things, and don't be afraid to mess up sometimes. The best resellers are the ones who are always learning and adapting.
I think that's a great place to wrap things up. Thanks for being here with us for this deep dive into the world of reselling Amazon returns.
My pleasure.
And to everyone listening, we wish you all the best in your reselling adventures.